They scoured cemeteries looking for young people who had died very early in their lives, like 1, 2, 3, 5 years old. And they would then take the name and the date, get a social insurance number, and then they would open accounts. And, we've had so many instances of child identity theft, which is very tragic.
I'm Shawnee Delaney. I spent years undercover as a Defense Intelligence Agency case officer.
And I'm Tyler Gray. I served as a U.S. Army Ranger sniper, as well as an assaulter in an elite Tier 1 counterterrorism unit. This is Control Room.
Today, I am super excited to introduce one of the most recognized cybersecurity experts out there, Adam Levin. Adam, welcome to the show.
You are too kind. Thank you very much.
No, this is legit. Please, can you, just to start, tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this? You have a really, really interesting background.
Well, I started in law. I was an undergraduate in constitutional law at Stanford.
We all have flaws.
That's true. That's true. Sharks. Anyway, went to law school at University of Michigan. So in my third year, I commuted between Michigan and New Jersey and ran for the United States Congress. Won the primary, shocked, and lost the general. Decided to stay in government and started working for the Division of Consumer Affairs in New Jersey as a volunteer. Ran a number of undercover investigations for them. And when the director was elevated to commissioner of banking, the governor appointed me as director of the agency. And at that time, I was the youngest person in the agency. So then I resigned in 1982 and ran for the United States Congress again. Came closer, but not quite close enough. And then was approached by a friend from out west who was a songwriter. And he had an idea.
That's an interesting transition.
Yeah.
It is indeed. He came to me and said, there's this thing called the internet, and I think it's going to work.
What year was this?
That was 1993, 94, right in there. And he said, you're not going to believe this, but I just got the domain credit.com by swapping a hard drive for it.
What?
So for an $1,800 hard drive, we got the domain credit.com, which we then developed over the years. And in 2002, he wanted to do something else, so I bought him out. I brought new people in, and at that time, I was approached by a legal services organization that no one's ever heard of, and they said, we've made a bid on the credit card portfolio of a very big company to offer them our services. We think our bid is going to be too high, but there is something we think we can add to it that would make our bid worthwhile, and that's identity theft resolution services. Said, you're in the credit business, got to know somebody. So we looked around for about 3 months, the operating partners and I, and realized there wasn't anybody. And they said, we think we can do it better. But it started in 2003 as Identity Theft 911. Over the years, we grew. And then in 2021, we got an offer we couldn't refuse.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
This would explain the term pioneer in your resume. I mean, you've been really not just a part of this from the beginning, but it sounds like instrumental in really designing a lot of these systems that we currently, maybe take for granted today. Sounds like instrumental in really building a lot of the protections that we see in place today. We live currently in a surveillance economy, and most people, I think, would be more familiar with the term surveillance state. Right. But you're saying we live currently in a surveillance economy. Can you break down what that really means for the average person?
Sure. Think of it that everywhere you turn, you are interacting with Internet of Things devices. I mean, a hospital is an Internet of Things device. Your car is an Internet of Things device. Everything in your home, it could be as many as 128 different devices in your home.
In one home.
That's right. Baby monitors, printers, computers. Now
refrigerator.
Smart refrigerator.
Garage door openers.
They came up with the idea of a smart mattress cover. It knows when you go to sleep. It then can set the temperature. It knows when you're up. The only problem is that if anyone hacks into it, they know too.
Yeah.
So we're surrounded by these things. So the question is, how can you create this environment when you're surrounded by billions of these devices that are all tracking, theoretically sending information back for the better, but unfortunately, if they become compromised, it's for the worst. There was a great story. There was a fellow in Switzerland who was a hacker, And he lived in a neighborhood where somebody who was the CFO of a mega oil company lived in that neighborhood. Now, he knew, based on the neighbors, that this man's wife loved cats. And so he set up a scenario where he kept sending her cat pictures, but there was malicious code in the cat picture. And when she downloaded it, it immediately got into her home network and got into her husband's computer and got all the financials for that oil company.
Wow. Yeah.
All because of a cat photo.
Yeah,
cat photo.
I do have to say, it wasn't cyber, but I did use cats and kittens for an op once, so it does work. I'm curious, what is the most challenging case, the worst case of identity theft that you've ever seen?
Oh, we worked with a woman in Arizona who was a victim of every possible form of identity theft you can imagine, perpetrated by one other woman. And I mean, she was a victim.
Did she know her?
Did not know her, but apparently this woman knew her. But this woman went so far as to steal her unemployment benefits, to get into her medical files and medical identity theft. They opened accounts that she was on the hook for. They got arrested and they served jail time in her name.
What?
Yeah. And it took a very long time to resolve that problem. So she was, if you think about it, a victim of true name identity theft, credit card identity theft, medical identity theft, and like the movie ID Thief, criminal identity theft. And criminal identity theft is terrifying.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, there's so many different types of frauds. And one thing that I thought was interesting when it comes to that was the Day of the Jackal cemetery scam.
Yep.
I'd love to hear about that one.
It was incredibly creative. And what they did is they scoured cemeteries looking for young people who had died very early in their lives, like 1, 2, 3, 5 years old.
Early? Wow, okay.
And they would then take the name and the date, and then they would take that information and they would go and basically get a social insurance number, or there already was one because they were born, or in the U.S. it would be a social security number. And then they would open accounts and do, we've had so many instances of child identity theft. And this is even more horrifying.
So if you freeze your child's credit, and I know we're going real dark, and something happens to them, do you keep that frozen? Like, how do you protect?
You have to keep it frozen.
Okay.
Yeah, you should definitely keep it frozen. But there are many instances also, which is very tragic, of parents stealing their children's information. Like, for instance, a parent is having financial issues, they can't get a credit card, their child has no record. So what they do is they use the child's information, they open an account, or they use that information for utilities. And with most credit reporting agencies, they don't, unless you open a file with them, which essentially means you apply for credit, they don't really know you exist.
Wow.
They don't have a file.
One thing I think is we were talking earlier about overall concepts don't change. And one overall concept that is just an unfortunate fact, we've all dealt with it multiple times, but I think one thing that the consumer needs to understand is that there will always be an inverse relationship between security and convenience.
Correct.
That's just the way it works. It's just something that you have to accept. And the more security that you have, which is good, the less convenient is going to be. And so really for me, and I think for everyone, it's really about finding what the right balance is in your life between convenience and security.
Without question. But the important thing that we have to remember at the end of the day is nobody can do this alone. That government has not done enough. Business has not done enough.
Yeah.
Consumers, we haven't done enough. And a lot of people say, I'm not trained for this. I don't know that much about it. Why is it on me? Well, the answer is that nobody knows the things you do better than you do.
Yeah.
And it's your data.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to use a silly password, if you're going to not use two-factor authentication, if you're going to just happily click on every link, download every app. There was one app that was hugely popular, and people didn't realize when they gave permission for this app that they gave permission for the app developers to get into their entire Google world. And when it was brought to the attention of developers, they went, oh, no, we didn't know anything about that. And the answer is, Of course they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole app had a very interesting, unstated intent, which it's a fascinating rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well, did you remember
to go
with
down.
with the flashlight apps? Did that
Yes,
the FTC went
yes.
after all this because nobody realized they were giving them access to their contacts.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, is because there are so many apps in these app stores and the Google Play Store, and people assume it must be legit. It's on the store. But there's just so many that they don't have the bandwidth to go check everything. So how do you know if it's legit or if it's not legit?
Well, you have to assume, first of all, if it's on a legitimate app store, then read reviews. Read reviews and pay particular attention to the negative reviews. Because when people feel that they have been wronged, they get loud.
They're very vocal, yes.
Yeah. I mean, positive reviews, the company just invents positive reviews. They're not going to do negative reviews.
Right.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that. But also, and I know people don't want to hear this, but read the permissions you're giving.
Yeah.
Now, there's a movement to change these permissions from 27th grade English and mouse print to bigger print that's understandable by humans as opposed to a team of
legalese. Yeah.
So, that's an issue too, is just like when we say to a company, do you know where all the data is that you've collected?
No one
and
can
they
answer
go,
that. No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's the same with people. Know your stuff.
It's just so interesting. You've really built a framework on how people can survive and prepare for that. The 3 M's, which again, I thought the 3 M's were amazing. Can you speak about those?
Oh, absolutely. So I wrote a book many years ago. It's called Swiped. How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves.
It's a good title.
So it's a classic.
Great name.
I have not yet updated it, but what's interesting is a lot of the principles stated in that book have not changed.
Yeah.
Obviously, AI, large language models have really, changed everything.
It's a tool.
now.
Yeah.
Right. But again, they're going after they're still going after your data, and they're going after it in the same kinds of ways.
So what are the 3 M's? How does it work?
Okay. The first is minimize your risk of exposure, which means reduce your attackable surface. The second M is monitor, so you know as quickly as possible you have a problem. And the third M is manage the damage.
Okay. And can you give examples?
Oh, sure. Well, the first M, we talk about minimizing risk of exposure. That is, use long and strong passwords. Do not share them among sites. Do not share them with friends or neighbors. You can also do what some people do is you take 3 disassociated words and then replace some of the letters with symbols. Even better yet, get a password manager.
Yeah, those are very easy.
They're very easy. All you need to remember is the password to the password manager. And so that's very important. Second thing is 2-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, whether you're using a fob or a code that comes to your phone or whatever, or any of those. That's good. The third is do not just click on links or open in attachments. And if you get a note from somebody you work with, pick up the phone and call them. Also, when you're creating answers to security questions, do not give the truth. All the website cares about is did you give the same answer you gave when you set it up? So the second M is monitor. And there are a few elements of it. Number 1, get your credit report. And don't just say, hey, I got my credit report and put it on the side. Look at it. And what you're looking for, is there any indication whatsoever of something you have never seen before?
Like I found a wrong address in mine, somewhere I'd never been before.
That happens in a lot of the cases. And also, I never held that job, or I don't know anything about those credit cards, or I have a mortgage on my house. There have been cases where someone stole somebody's identity and got a mortgage on their home. Usually they try to do that with elderly people that have paid off their homes that are really not paying attention. So why would they? They paid off their home. So check your credit report, make sure that everything that's on it makes sense.
And report if there are inaccuracies.
Report immediately if you find any inaccuracy. The second thing is monitor your credit score. Because if your credit score takes a sudden precipitous drop, there's only 3 reasons. You didn't pay a bill on time, you're using too much of your available credit, or you're a victim of identity theft. So you really need to follow that closely. The third thing is sign up for transaction alerts from your financial institutions that you do business with. And because a lot of banks may miss it, or credit unions, it looks like it's in the same area,
Yeah.
but if you look at it and go, I was never at that address yesterday. I wasn't even in state yesterday. So you need to look at that. And some people go, well, I'm not interested in any transaction below 100. The answer is, no, you are, because it's the little transactions.
So on that note, what is the third M?
Okay, managing the damage. So managing the damage, you can do it yourself. It's a nightmare. Nightmare.
Not
You have
recommended.
to keep
1 star.
incredibly thorough records. You have to get the police report. You end up fighting with creditors. You have a problem. Maybe it's with the Internal Revenue Service, because another thing they do is they use your information and they file a fake tax return. They get your refund. And some people go, I wasn't even entitled to a refund. And now the IRS is coming after you going, you're right, you weren't entitled. We want the money back. But I never got the money. So these are real life problems that people face. So you have to manage the damage. Well, there's an alternative. You should be thinking about getting far more sophisticated forms of monitoring, not just credit monitoring, but identity monitoring and dark web monitoring, and also resolution service.
If there was only one that we knew about.
Can you? I know those guys.
I mean, a great a comparison I think that we could all use, using the analogy of digital hygiene, is, it takes, 3 minutes every day to brush your teeth. Okay, that's 3 minutes of time. But if you don't brush your teeth, you're going to end up with a root canal, and that's going to take, whatever amount of time and pain and suffering.
And money.
And money. And it's that analogy is a direct comparison to digital hygiene. If you don't put that little amount of time in prep and maintenance, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a catastrophic, the root canal equivalent of identity theft, and it's going to cause a lot more pain, misery, time, and cost. And so you really have to put in that time in maintenance. If not, you're going to put it in on the back end on trying to recover something that could have been prevented had you done the work earlier.
And I know that you just talked about medical stuff. I know one of the things that you talk about also is monitoring like EOB statements for your health insurance.
Sorry,
Absolutely.
what's an EOB statement?
Explanation of benefits.
So a lot of people, they just get it and they just file
Throw it away.
And it is shocking that you will find, if you look at that explanation of benefit statements, that someone using your information has gotten either medical treatment or has had an exam or is getting prescriptions that you had no clue. And it could be eating up your insurance.
Yeah.
It could end up as a medical debt, which I know they've been trying to get medical debt off credit reports because they understand this is a problem. But it's a very serious problem. And if you become a victim, for instance, of medical identity theft, and if it just happens to be at the same facility that you use, your blood type could suddenly be changed, which could be life-threatening.
Oh, geez. This is something I've never heard of before.
Yeah. It hasn't happened, but doctors are worried that it could happen. And if you become a victim of medical identity theft, it is a long, agonizing process, because there are many doctors that take the position, I cannot remove that information from your file, because if I ever get sued, I need to point to it and say, what did
This is
I know?
why,
This
yeah.
was in the file.
I mean, it's understandable.
terrifying.
Both sides are tough on that one.
How do you move forward in the world and have a normal life without being absolutely paranoid?
Well, I think the most important thing is a little paranoia is not a bad
Yeah,
deal.
a little healthy.
But at the same point, you got to live your life. And in fact, LifeLock, one of my favorite commercials with them is, you got a life, live it. We'll handle the rest.
Yeah.
And that's really true, is as long as you know that you got a professional organization backing you up, and as long as you take basic cyber hygiene protections, you can weather the storm. It's the difference between a life-changing, gut-wrenching experience versus, okay, it was annoying as heck, but thank God I had these people there standing beside me.
Yeah, in my corner, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what is really the takeaway, the hope?
When I talk to anybody that has gone through this, they said, if I only knew. It's daunting, yes, but if we can get this relationship between government, business, media, and the consumer, and all work together, because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And, when I hear a company
team.
go, hey, we did an anti-phishing campaign, and 99.9% of the people, they weren't fooled. And the answer is, all you need is one. So it's when people are presented with the fact you personally can change things in a very important way just by paying attention.
Absolutely. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for enlightening us. The health EOB statements was particularly interesting, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I love the 3Ms. And
Yeah.
what I think is so interesting about the 3Ms is really their by time frame. Things you can do in prep, things you can do kind of during, and then things you can do afterwards. That's something people can remember, think of, and really apply to any security aspect, not just cyber, in my opinion, as a more of a physical security expert. But I think that's absolutely awesome. I learned so much, and really thank you for coming out today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe and leave comments. We'd love to hear from you.
New episodes coming every week on LifeLock's YouTube channel.